Warning: this episode contains discussions of graphic violence, violence against the mentally ill, and strong language. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of PauseCast. It's a show about video games, it's a show about movies, it's a show about criticism, it's a show about the things that we love, and just kind of everything. My name is Jessica Alouette, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Mark, and I use he, him.
So, first episode, kind of a big deal.
Exciting.
Very exciting. Myself and Mark have had some great conversations at work, just kind of at lunch, and we'll talk about video games because it's something that we both enjoy.
Yeah, and when you love something, you want to talk about it, and sometimes the conversations go on, and when you have similar thoughts, they bounce off back and forth, and you can get some new ideas and develop your own ideas, and we thought we'd start sharing them.
Yeah, and that's going to be the show. It's for everyone.
I thought one good thing to introduce ourselves as well might be, so we play games, but what do we have that we play games on? So I'm primarily a PC gamer, but I've also got a 3DS that I use. I've got a PS3, but I don't really use it very much.
And I've got a Wii U, a PC that is relatively powerful, an iPhone to occasionally play some like threes on, 3DS, PS3, and PS4. So
I think you win that one.
I'm fairly well equipped, it seems.
I've got a PSP somewhere. I'm hoping to find it when I move.
Yeah, because you were looking to play.
I was
Monster Hunter.
Well, no, I've been playing Monster Hunter
Fantasy
on 3DS.
And you've got Final Fantasy Dissidia, or
yes, that's what I was. I wanted to play more Dissidia, and I also know that at one point I'm going to want to play through Crisis Core again, because that's a game that I really, really enjoyed a lot.
Now, what was Crisis Core again?
So Crisis Core was a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, set up as an action RPG.
Right. Okay.
On PSP.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed it. I thought it had a really good story. Some things, as with all games, that I didn't like, but many, many, many things I did like.
Yeah. Like Final Fantasy VII itself has a few kind of scenes by modern standards.
It's going to be interesting to see how those come out in the remake that's being done.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that's going to be cut. And I think there's a couple scenes that could be cut because they're not terribly important, or they could be modified.
Are you thinking of the spa scene and stuff like that?
I'm thinking about the spa scene, yes.
Yeah.
I think it could probably be cut, or done differently. It doesn't need to be cut, but to fit kind of a modern audience, it would make sense that scene would be modified a little bit.
It's kind of different to do that stuff when you've got that super deformed art style as well. It doesn't have the same feel to it.
Yeah.
As it would with a super realistic one I think they're trying to do now.
And there's been some concern about that as well, with a particular scene involving a very, very long sword. There's some worry about how graphic is that scene going to be in the modern era.
Now that's interesting. Is this something that needs a spoiler warning?
I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say yes as well. But
because this is a game that is coming out just as much as it's a game that is now a decade and a half old.
It's become kind of the quintessential spoiler everybody knows, but we might be perhaps getting to a point where younger people haven't played this game because it came out in 1997. So they might not know about it. So, yep, let's do a spoiler warning for Final Fantasy VII.
And by the spoiler warning, we mean we're not going to talk about this in any sort of detail. Like I said, it's just a scene that involves a particularly long sword.
Okay, we can cut the spoiler warning and not say any more.
Yeah, but yeah, there's been concern about how graphic that scene's going to be. There's some scenes that, like I said, just don't fit the modern lens. So it's going to be interesting to see how that holds up, and it's also going to be interesting to see how it handles being split into several games.
Oh, no, that's a development I didn't know about.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. So the summary of this is that the Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS4 is going to be cut into probably 2 or 3 games. And the reason for this is so that they can keep all the content of the game in there, but still be able to, have a reasonable, be able to release bits of it in a reasonable time frame. Because each component of that's still going to be a 40, 50, 60-hour game.
So it's a time frame of release thing rather than fitting everything on the disc thing.
Yeah, well, there is that too. Like, Blu-rays can only fit 25 gigs on a single layer and 50 gigs on a dual layer. So, for the sheer amount of content that's in Final Fantasy VII that's being updated and the scale of that game, there's no way that would fit on a single Blu-ray. You could distribute it as 2 Blu-rays, but by then you're already also waiting probably I'd say 5 to 6 years for that remaster from the time it's announced, in which case why'd you announce it now?
If it's coming out in 2 parts, I can think of where they'd split it in 2, but I wouldn't want to have to wait years after that to play the second half.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably going to happen anyway. There's been some theorizing that it's going to happen in a similar way to Final Fantasy XIII's story, which was split into 3 parts.
Well, was it split into 3 parts, or were 2 more parts tacked onto the end?
I'm not going to comment on that because I don't know for sure. I haven't played all of 13.
I've played 13 and a decent portion, but not all of 13 too.
Okay.
And it felt to me like 13 was pretty complete, and 13.2 came out of nowhere for me.
Okay. I know that 13.3 definitely attaches to 13.2 in a way
absolutely.
that is meaningful.
13.2 was a lead up to 13.3 the whole time, is my impression.
Okay.
But the same can't be said about the first 13.
Yeah. But yeah, there's been some concern about kind of that aspect of Final Fantasy VII's remake. Though I will say Square Enix has succeeded with its episodic model in another place that I want to talk about super quick.
That?
Hitman.
I forget that's Square Enix.
Yeah, Square Enix and IO Interactive
Right.
have released this newest Hitman iteration as an episodic title.
And you've been playing that?
I have been. The first 2 episodes... The 3rd episode is out right now. I realize this as we're recording. My PlayStation... Do
you want to go and buy it now?
No, I already own it. So.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to set that up to download probably just while I record. But the 3rd episode is out now. There's been 2 episodes to date. And it's been really, really interesting because, first of all, it really encourages mastery of the levels, and this is rewarded through the mastery experience system that it has, which unlocks different starting points and different gear depending on how much you've mastered a level.
So for anyone who hasn't played the Hitman series, like I haven't, what's the basic summary of what they're about?
They are a Rube Goldberg machine of death.
Right, so one of those fancy contraptions where you press a button and it rolls a marble over that makes the thing spin around and pops your toast out of the toaster 5 steps down the line.
Yeah, exactly. One of those.
Of death.
Yeah, of death. There's a knife or a bullet at the end. Because the Hitman games are as much of a stealth game as they are a puzzle game, where you have to figure out paths of guards and stuff like that, and you also have to figure out, oh, well, if I use this thing on this other thing, I can trigger this event, or I can make the target move over to this area where they're more isolated, or because I'm wearing this disguise, this other character will trust me so I can access this area.
And the idea of this mastery experience you've been talking about, that's you want to do the level over and over again in as many different ways as possible.
Yep, and the game encourages this. There's like a set of challenges for the level, things that you have to discover. There's also a set of challenges for ways to finish a level. For example, one of the challenges is dropping one target onto another from like a 3-story building.
Are they moving targets?
They are moving targets.
That sounds tough to achieve.
Totally plausible.
Have you done it?
I haven't done it.
Okay.
I know that it's been done, but it's a plausible scenario that is very, very tricky and would require some precise timing.
And probably several attempts.
And yeah, probably several attempts. Hitman's rather merciful with its checkpointing in the more recent entries.
How's that?
That saves every couple of minutes.
Okay. And you can just revert.
Yeah. Or you can just restart the level if you're like, oh, I want to try a completely radically different approach. But if you want to just retry on the same approach, it saves every couple of minutes, you're fine. Yeah, that's Hitman. It's pretty fucking good. Something interesting that they've been doing with that episodic model as well is the elusive targets, which are targets that appear for 48 hours within the world of Hitman. And they have so far just done 2, one in each of the episode levels. And they make these levels a little bit harder by adding some additional modifiers, like you can't track the targets quite as easily. You'll have to actually seek them out. There's some clues in the briefing as to where you might find them.
Do you know who they are? Like, you will know them.
Oh, yeah, you know who they are. You can see their face. You can see their outfit.
Okay.
So tracking them that way becomes fairly easy. But it still requires some attention to detail. You can open up your intel and see who is your target at any time.
Now, am I right that you told me that these community events, they're a one attempt only thing, and if you fail, you fail?
Yeah, basically. The idea is if you die, that's it. You can't retry that contract. The target has gotten away. If you kill the target and then try to restart it, you can't. You can. I found it recently that you can actually restart if you haven't killed the target and haven't died. If you just want to retry, you have that option.
Okay.
So
if you're hiding in a corner, people are coming for you, you can be like, I want to try this again.
Yeah, it's like, maybe I'll go at this one more time. But the intent is clearly that you plan carefully, do it perfectly, or as perfectly as you can, and that's the aim of these contracts.
What sort of time pressure is there on that? Is there some sort of timer or anything like that counting down, or is it just how patient you can be?
There's no timer counting down. It's a 48-hour target. So you only have to start the contract before that timer expires. So if you were, say, 5 minutes left, you could just start it. After 5 minutes, you would not be able to retry, but you would still be able to see that contract through.
Okay.
And it rewards a substantial chunk of mastery experience as well, so you can go through the level in different ways. But they've really hit the nail on the head with this episodic model with this, because it promotes so much mastery of the game.
I suppose when your options are limited because there's only 2 levels that's been released, you have to retry them in many
it's like,
ways.
I want to go play some Hitman. Oh, wait, there's 2 episodes. I'll try this one, but I'll do it in a different way. I'll try something. I'll start in a new place, and I'll start with, like, just coins. No lock picks, no guns, no nothing. Just a couple coins, and I have to find everything there. And that could make that would make the level very hard to do, but also very fun, I would think.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's Hitman.
Okay.
And that's kind of the Square Enix hour on PauseCast.
Unless you ask me what I've been playing and I have to answer Final Fantasy X.
Yeah. You have been playing a ton of Final Fantasy X. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
I have. Well, 10, kind of like 7, it's one of those games that I first encountered when I was younger. I mean, this game is 15 years old, and I had a brief chance to play the first few hours of it on a friend's console, and I found it very memorable. And then it disappeared from my life, and I didn't have an option of getting it again. In the case of 10, I actually bought a PS2 many years later, got Final Fantasy 10, got all the way up until the final area, and then my cat threw up inside my PS2 and it stopped working.
Okay, stop for just a second.
Yeah.
How the fuck?
Well, it's more she threw up on it, but it got inside anyway.
Oh.
You're welcome.
Cat puke and just like animal puke is just profoundly bad.
Yeah, the PS2 didn't like it either. And by that point, it was not easy to find another one, and I didn't feel like finding another one, to be honest. So it's been until now, when it's finally come out with the HD remaster on PC, that I've been able to replay it, and I am loving it. It's everything I remember, just as good or maybe better. I really like games with a very strong story, and I really like the story in Final Fantasy X. So it's been really enjoyable going back through that again, and especially with one of these games that I first encountered years ago, it feels kind of like coming back to old friends again, you know?
Yeah.
So that's really fun.
Now, something we've also talked about is just kind of how much I don't have any nostalgia for any Final Fantasy titles. I don't. So 13 and 10 have been kind of the first Final Fantasy games I've ever played.
Yeah.
So when I got around to 10, I didn't have a lot of the nostalgia for the design, so I was kind of wary of it. And something I noticed about it was kind of its moment to moment is really, really wonky.
One thing it doesn't handle very well is there are some really odd pauses in the dialogue, and I don't think that's entirely intentional. I think it's a product of the era of technology, you know.
I mean, there's also Tidus's laugh. That's a thing that happens.
That scene is
it's horrific.
It's pretty infamous, I guess.
I think it's the most infamous scene in any Final Fantasy game, other than the aforementioned long sword scene.
That one's also pretty memorable.
I
for different reasons.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an iconic Final Fantasy scene. But yeah, the laugh is also pretty iconic of Final Fantasy.
I'm gonna do this is probably an unpopular opinion, but I think the scene does add significantly to the story of 10.
I wouldn't disagree from what I've seen at all. I wouldn't disagree that it is a significant and interesting scene that does, in fact, add to the character of Tidus and to Yuna as well. But I would I could do without that voice acting.
I can't say more without spoiling it for you or anyone else who's listening who may not have played through it. I know you haven't gotten very far.
No, I have not.
The scene is probably more important than you think as well. It has long-lasting influence, I think.
Good to know.
But yeah, so despite its infamy and many people thinking it's really, really bad, I am glad it's there.
And like I said, from what I've seen so far, I just wouldn't disagree. I just, again, that voice acting, totally could do without it. Now, something you and I have both been playing as well, we've been playing some Fallout 4.
Yeah. I'm glad that I can finally play it again after that black screen bug I encountered. That was fun.
Yeah, so do you want to tell the story of that real quick?
Well, yeah, so I was involved in the closed beta phase for the modding tools, but I didn't really get to do it because that version of the beta with the ability to load mods in the game through the official interface, when I tried to start that, I just had a black screen with a flashing loading cursor forever. Sometimes I'll get through the main menu, remaining flashing, and then no further. So I sort of gave up for a while. I reverted from the beta so I could still play the game, and that was fine. But when I came back to it more recently, it was no longer in beta anymore, and that bug was now in the mainstream of it. So I didn't have the option of opting out of it again. Luckily, I found out that by running the game in not full screen but borderless window mode, fixed it. So I'm able to play it again. So That's good, but unfortunately the bug meant I missed out on the most important times, perhaps, in the development of the modding tools. Well, prior to their release, at least.
I would say you missed out on kind of vital moments in developing those.
Luckily, the stuff I'm interested there is the scripting, and I can write and compile scripts outside of all of that. That's fine, but I couldn't test them because I couldn't load the game in a way that would load them. So that was unfortunate. I'll have to return to it at some point now.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see what people can do with the official modding tools, and also what Bethesda is willing to kind of share through those.
Now, aren't they putting mods out on consoles as well? Do you know what the story is there?
They are. They are indeed. I know that they're coming to the Xbox One first.
Okay, because Microsoft is paying for it, presumably.
I don't know if that's the case. I think
No?
it's just that the architecture is so similar between PC and Xbox that it enables that.
Perhaps it's just a sign of how jaded I am that my assumption for Xbox first is always, oh, Microsoft paid for the exclusive or for it to come out there earlier.
I have some fun stories that Rami Ismail, who works at Vlambeer, and they developed Nuclear Throne. They actually told some fun stories, but I will not be disclosing those.
Okay. I'll take your word for it
Just because they are kind of business sensitive. But he told them at a developer meetup here in Auckland, and it was some fun stuff. But back to the point, yeah, I don't think that's the result of Microsoft paying for it. I think it's just because the architecture is so similar between them that it's easier. I do know that Microsoft was, however, pretty heavily involved in marketing Fallout 4.
Right.
And it was included in a console bundle, which Microsoft dictates those console bundles just as much as Sony dictates console bundles there. So whenever you see something in a store that's like, get a PS4 that's 1 terabyte with Uncharted 4, and that's $649, which is normally the price of a PS4 here standalone. Those bundles are dictated by Sony. The stores don't have any say in those. But Microsoft included Fallout 4 with the Xbox One for a extended period of time, I would say. So that's that.
It's nice to see them opening it up because they recently, well, not quite so recently anymore, but they had that what ended up being a failed experiment of paid-for mods that they tried out. And that reverted within days, whereas this seems to be going the opposite direction of really opening them up to console users as well, which is quite nice.
Can I tell you a controversial opinion I have about those paid mods?
Yeah, please.
My controversial opinion is that paid mods were a good idea. I
agree.
I think they were fine.
I agree.
I think that the way that Bethesda was structuring it was ethically questionable. But I think that the idea of paid mods is totally fine.
So when you say ethically questionable, is that referring to the split that they determined on how much of the money they get versus how much the modders get?
That's referring to the split between Bethesda and the developers, and how Bethesda was taking like 70%.
I think it was around 2/3 or something.
It was just ridiculous, and I think that was a huge problem with it, and I think that was most of the problem even with paid mods conceptually. But I think that if the developer was taking a lesser cut, if they were taking maybe the standard kind of 10-20% that they take on user-generated content, like the Steam Marketplace, for example, you trade a card in there. I think it's Valve that gets a 10% cut, and it's the developer that gets a 10% cut of all of those microtransactions.
Okay.
So I think charging for mods on that model, where the developer of the mod gets 80%, and that Bethesda and Valve can take their small cut, but Valve for hosting and Bethesda for producing the original content and producing the scripting and all that, I think that could have been a satisfactory thing. But I also think that paid mods exposed a critical problem with Steam.
What's that?
The lack of curation.
Hmm.
Because
Okay.
everybody could put up a paid mod, there was instantly abuse of that model. Where people were putting up, mods that were several $100s and added like an apple to a tavern. Nobody would buy these, of course, but it's patently stupid.
It just sort of gets in the way.
Exactly, and it gets in the way of everybody else's shit. Like,
I think there were. Oh, sorry, no, go on.
Like, what the fuck are you doing? Do you have better time? You've better uses of your time than fucking this. Please.
I think there were some other problems with the way they tried to do that, which mainly stem from trying to put it onto a community that's already developed. I was involved. They asked me to be involved from the start, like see if I could make something. I didn't in the end. I didn't have time to do it, but it means I got to see a bit behind it. And there was a relatively short time frame from modders who would be in sort of the first wave of this being able to start working on something and it actually coming out as a paid thing. So they kind of had the option of a relatively small thing or repurposing something existing. And I think it's pretty clear to everyone when you take something that's already free and you make it paid, people are going to be annoyed at that, even if it's just this thing is free and all the extra stuff from now is paid or something. I can understand that.
I think that the lack of communication surrounding that whole thing also amplified it. Like, devs knew, but the community at large didn't know, like, shit about this. We didn't know shit about shit. It just happened.
I think a better approach would have been just to either do it at the start with, like, a game's released, it's got mods, you can have a price tag on them, or have a longer period of time before it, and make it open. But I think perhaps the best place for paid mods would have been on ones that have teams working on them. They could be small teams, but more than one person taking a long time. And that is something that is really going to be worth paying for, as opposed to the small things that could be produced in a week or two of someone's spare time, which is what was really available in this case.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't get me wrong, some people can do really cool things in a week or two of spare time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't mean to imply otherwise. But I can see the place for paid mods being in much more content-rich mods than that, I think.
I could also see paid mods being better received if they were communicated like a month in advance. Like,
I'm not convinced that would have been the case.
I think they might have been better received, like starting on starting July the 1st, because it's the 31st of May today. So starting a month from today, Skyrim will now be offering the ability to pay for mods.
I think you underestimate just how entitled the modding community feels.
I think you might be right. I'd like to believe.
I haven't been as active in it in the past couple of years, but I was quite active when Skyrim came out, and I was writing a bunch of tutorials for its scripting engine and such.
Okay.
And when there's been this long history of Bethesda games having mods, and it's always been free, people who've been around in that for a long time didn't feel affronted, or some of them will, affronted when that sort of thing comes up. And there's still a place for sort of open source type stuff. Like, all the things that I've done tend to be scripting utility type things that I'll make open, like anyone can use them however they like, and that's fine. People who have skills as an artist or whatever are making content that's a bit different, I feel. That's where I think that this thing could have worked quite well, but I can see how many people who might have been around for a while wouldn't see it that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But maybe one day.
I still think there's absolutely room for that model to exist. It's just a matter of kind of when and who's going to do it right.
Yeah.
Who's going to have the right model for it. And I kind of wonder if Valve is ever going to be the right company to have that model. I don't think that they ever will be, but I think another company could support paid mods and other kind of riskier content, I guess.
What do you have any companies you think might be able to handle that? Because when it comes to modding, it's very much a PC first thing, at least, generally a PC only thing, and Steam is definitely the biggest player in that scene.
I think, yeah, Steam is the biggest player, but I still don't think Valve is the right kind of company to manage something like that. I think that you might see something better from GOG, Good Old Games.
Mm-hmm.
You might see some more interesting mods come from them, actually, because they're dedicated to these older titles.
Do they have anything currently for modding?
I don't know if they do, is the thing.
Okay.
So at the moment, Steam is kind of the go-to because they have the Steam Workshop, which is fascinating. They have a lot of advantages in terms of platform size, but like I said, yeah, I'm just not convinced that Valve is the right person to be running that business.
Fair enough.
All right. With that, would you like to get into a few questions from hopefully some future listeners?
Sure.
All right. So our first question comes to us from Twitter. At Lindsay Jobson asks, is it finally time for mainstream VR, or will it fizzle out for a later attempt?
Ooh.
I think it's time.
Yeah? Now, what do you see using it?
What do you mean, what do I see using it? Like,
Actually, asking that question makes me think. Aren't there some spaceship piloting games that have done have gone into a lot of detail into like the in-cockpit views and stuff like that, like Elite Dangerous and Star
EVE
Citizen,
Online.
right? EVE Online has done it as well.
EVE Online has a full VR thing.
See, I've not played them, but I know about that, and I think that could be a really cool way to use VR.
Yeah, and I think VR just like is kind of cool in general, and there's a lot of really cool and interesting stuff coming out on VR. Like, for example, I frequently hear virtual desktops being talked about where you just put on your VR headset and you have the equivalent of 3 monitors to be running your stuff on. And you could extend that out kind of as much as you wanted to as well.
When you talk about virtual desktops, I can't help but think of that goofy Heavy Rain virtual desktop thing where you can be sitting in an aquarium or something.
I think the idea is kind of like that. You choose your setting and you still have your full computer setup.
So this is more of an augmented reality than a virtual reality thing, right?
I guess so, yeah. But
I mean, augmented reality, it's kind of a subset of virtual reality, right? And we've got stuff coming on that like Pokemon Go.
Yeah, basically. Pokemon Go's looking fascinating, by the way. There is some beta stuff opening for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. But I think mainstream VR is kind of here. As much as I may not be like participating in it right now.
I think it's still quite niche, like mainly because you need the specialized hardware for it, and it's not super expensive, but it's not something that will come with a console or come with a gaming PC. So I think that currently means it's still sort of off in its own corner, even though
it is
some
sort of niche, but more and more often I hear stories of people who like show their parents that like this VR stuff, or they hear about VR and they know you got a headset, so they call you up like, I want to see this VR thing. You've got to show me. I'm hearing a lot of stories like that. And I think that kind of speaks to how much VR is spreading. And I think that that's fascinating, and I think that we have a lot of potential for seeing some growth in that space. But I also know that right now the hardware is still prohibitively expensive and still dedicated to PCs. There is a DRM war going on between Oculus and the Vive.
You sound like you know more about this than me, and I'm aware that I just a minute ago, said it's not hugely expensive. But I don't actually know. How expensive are they, do you know?
Well, a consumer VR, your average consumer VR headset is going to cost you about $600 to $700 US.
Okay, that's significantly more than I assumed.
And it also will cost you a $600 graphics card in your computer at the very least.
So we're talking essentially about the price of a console on top of a good PC already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Like we're talking about like you buy a good PC and then you buy a PS4. Like that kind of price. Maybe a little bit more expensive than that even.
Yeah.
But it is It's not cheap. And actually, speak of the devil, at Laura K. Buzz has just also tweeted, and that's Laura Kate Dale, for anyone who's not familiar. She's a video game critic, also appears on Pogquisition, which is fantastic. I would recommend listening to it. And she tweets that one of the biggest obstacles currently to VR mainstream adoption outside of price is the portability of setup.
You mean they're big and bulky?
No, the headsets themselves are not, but everything that's required to run them is quite bulky.
So it's not like a 3DS, you put it in your pocket and you walk around town?
No, of course not. It's like you have to have a tower, basically, to run these things to begin with. Let's see. She's followed that up with another tweet. Where the Wii could be thrown in a backpack and shown off easily to family or friends, VR requires likely moving your main gaming rig, which is, in most situations, it's going to be a tower, and it's going to be a beefy tower. Like my tower personally weighs at least in the range of 15 to 20 kilos.
I think I'm quite unusual in that my main gaming PC is a laptop, but it is the least portable laptop you have ever seen.
Yeah, I have seen that, and I can confirm that.
Yeah. Oh, hello, Gizmo. My cat's just jumped up. Hopefully he won't stop recording.
Oh, please, cat, don't fuck this up for us. Please.
That's all right. He's just jumping. He's just climbing down onto my lap.
Just having some fun.
Yeah. Okay, we might get some purring, but hey, that's okay.
I'm also going to link those tweets that I have just mentioned, and they will be available to everyone who would like to read them in the show notes.
Cool.
Can
you hear that purring, by the way?
Only barely.
Okay. I'm glad you can hear it at all.
Let's see. Another question from Twitter user Emma Dengery, who asks, how forgiving should checkpoints be? Start a whole level over between every challenge, or what?
There's some pretty different takes on this, eh? I mean, we were talking just earlier, Super Meat Boy is a game where you fail often and fast and restart almost immediately. Whereas,
and I should mention, when we say earlier, we mean before we started recording.
Yes.
So if you're confused as to where the Super Meat Boy conversation went, it's there. But we did discuss Super Meat Boy is designed to make you fail fast.
Whereas, as I was saying to you back then, what I feel is the opposite of that is Fallout 4's new survival mode, where you can only save infrequently, and if you die, you can lose hours of progress if you weren't careful.
Yeah, and I think to put something firmly in the middle here, because now we've got some extremes on either end, but in the middle here, I think we have Dark Souls.
Yeah, I was actually thinking Dark Souls has quite an interesting take on checkpoints, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you can fail fast, and everything resets to exactly the way that it was. There's no possibility for randomness in there, besides kind of enemy attacks and stuff, but you always know where things are going to be. So you can go back and tackle problems over and over.
One thing that I've found some games do that I've really liked is if you fail and you have to start again, you can do it without a loading screen. One game which I think did this quite well, which was kind of the first one I saw to have a take on this, was the revamp of Prince of Persia that came out a few years ago and has kind of gone nowhere since. But if you died in that, your NPC companion would, well, actually, I shouldn't say NPC because you play as them as well, your magical friend would save you and put you back on the last platform. And that was fine, you know?
Oh, so like a Mario Kart style situation where if you fall off the track, you're just brought back onto it.
Yeah, I guess. It was just a very short, like 2-second kind of almost cutscene where they grab your hand, pull you out of the black jelly that was eating you or whatever, and you're just back where you were. No harm done kind of thing. And that was fine. It one thing I liked about it is it didn't take that failure out of the narrative. A lot of the time, you know, if you fail a game, you have to load an earlier save, and it's as though that never happened. Whereas in Dark Souls does this as well. If you fail, you continue.
Yeah.
It sets you back, but it doesn't wipe that. It doesn't pretend it never happened.
Yeah, that
it happened,
progress.
And you get to keep going.
That progress is retrievable even because your souls are just dropped.
Well, so long as you don't die again, right?
Well, yeah, it's your souls are dropped. So if you get back to that point, you can pick them up and it's like you lost no progress at all.
For anyone who hasn't played Dark Souls, souls are exchangeable currency or experience.
Yeah, basically. They're a one-size-fits-all kind of thing for that, which is also fascinating design in and of itself. But talking about video games that do kind of no load screen transitions between failures actually brings me to another question.
Okay.
Where Tumblr user A Fucking Bird, which is a really, really good Tumblr username.
I thought you loved it.
A Fucking Bird asks about Mad Max. And I want to broaden this out to Arkham-style games in general, because I've been playing, like, I loved the Mad Max game. It was really, really good. Driving around in that world is fun. That world is beautiful. And it kind of turned me back onto the idea of Arkham-style combat after Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, so very definitely put me off of it.
A game you didn't like, but I really did like.
Yeah, it's one of those titles. A lot of critics really liked it too.
It's also another game where failure doesn't get wiped out.
Yeah, it's a game where failure is acknowledged and expected. But I've been playing more recently the Batman Arkham games themselves.
I've played through Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, but I haven't played Arkham Origins.
Okay. I own all of them at this point now. But Arkham Asylum and Arkham City I've been playing fairly recently. I really, really enjoyed Arkham Asylum, and I'm really, really enjoying City. And both, like, there's some points in, I won't say it always lets you do it, but Arkham Asylum is kind of interesting in that if you fall, say, into a pit, or you fall into a situation that's kind of bad and, you know, preventable, Batman has a grapple gun. So it slows everything down as you fall into this situation and gives you the opportunity to grapple out, which is interesting. And there's no loading screen in that transition.
So it's, rather than when you fail, it brings you back, it's when you fail, it gives you an opportunity to quickly get back on your feet as though nothing had happened?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Like, oh, you missed this pit, like you just landed in this pit instead of gliding all the way across.
Yeah,
that's fine. But we've put you back where you were.
It sounds similar to the Prince of Persia one, just with a little bit of user interactivity.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's cool. Batman games are pretty fun. I really wish that Arkham Asylum didn't lean so heavily on its mentally ill person tropes.
That's a problem with Batman stories in general, isn't it? It has been for as long as I've known about Batman.
Yeah, I've been finding that in Arkham City too. Like it's very much the same kind of, oh, we're leaning on harmful tropes here. And we're hoping nobody notices. But it's a thing that happens. It's not really dampening my enjoyment of the game, but it is worth kind of acknowledging. Because there's, like, Arkham Asylum has a lot of really, really horrifying imagery in it. There are enemies who, for example, have had the tops of their heads removed, and you can see that they are stapled back on all around, and it is very gruesome and nasty and kind of implies the old practice of lobotomy, which we know doesn't work.
I have no memory of those enemies.
They are everywhere. They're fairly common, in fact.
Maybe I'm just not that observant. Or maybe it's just been too long.
Either or.
I do believe you do that, don't worry.
Yeah, like the fact is they existed, and yeah, it's got a lot of other just wholly unpleasant stuff, but it's also got a lot of really brilliant design and interesting stuff going on in it. So I'm willing to say that I recommend the games on the basis that they're well designed and on the basis that they're fun. But it is worth acknowledging that really horrible stuff that is in there. So if you are averse to that sort of imagery, please do not play Arkham Asylum.
Its combat system has stood up really well, though, hasn't it? It's because it's been used across several games now, not only just the Arkham games, but it was inherited by Shadow of Mordor, which I know you say that you feel the sound design really let it down in that game.
Yeah, the sound design really, really killed the combat for me in that game.
And did the Mad Max game use the combat system as well?
Yeah, Mad Max used the combat system as well, and then added like the driving around and Mad Max's setting as well, which is also particularly compelling.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up being really solidly constructed. But that system's been used in a lot of games. It's been it's kind of mutated in some games as well, like in the most recent Assassin's Creed game. That system is kind of present.
Oh yeah, they did have something fairly similar to that from the start, I guess, with the countering, but they didn't have the same flow from enemy to enemy, did they?
Where it was far more complex in kind of anything pre, I would say, Assassin's Creed 3 was where they started using this.
I've not played anything post Assassin's Creed 3.
Yeah, they started using that kind of system in Assassin's Creed 3, and then Syndicate, they really kind of brought that to the forefront.
Cool. I do wish I picked up Syndicate instead of Assassin's Creed 3, because I didn't enjoy 3, but I have heard great things about Syndicate.
I really enjoyed Syndicate, and I really enjoyed 3. 3 definitely has one of the strongest stories in the Assassin's Creed series, and I will fight anybody over that.
You'll have to fight me then, because I felt like the story fell flat. To me, it seemed like the whole thing was an excuse to shoehorn the character into as many American historical events as possible. But maybe I just had a hard time seeing past that, perhaps.
That's the Assassin's Creed series in a nutshell. Like, I'm sorry, but that's the whole series. It's about, let's throw Karl Marx in there. That because he's just in Syndicate, inexplicably. Like, he's there.
Just like how Benjamin Franklin is just there in 3.
And Alexander Graham Bell is there, too. And Charles Dickens. They're all here. How amazing. Assassin's Creed 2 is like, and the rest of the Ezio games was like, Leonardo da Vinci is here for some reason.
Machiavelli, yeah.
He builds you a flying machine.
That's true. For some reason, I found it much more grating in 3, though. I don't know.
Maybe it's just because of American politics in general. I don't know.
Maybe. Let's not discuss that any further.
Oh, I wasn't planning on discussing that further. It was just like, maybe that's just because American history isn't necessarily as interesting as other eras.
Quite possibly.
Like, the Renaissance era is still fairly interesting. American Revolution isn't terribly interesting to me, and it's definitely going to be interesting to a lot of people who, live in the States, and this is actually their history playing out. But
we're never going to get a New Zealand Assassin's Creed.
No, sadly not.
That just reminds me of the XCOM 2 thing.
Please tell everyone about this shit show.
A recent XCOM 2 DLC came out, which had some new cosmetic stuff, face paint.
Yeah, this was the Alien Hunters DLC.
Yeah, that's right. And some of that new face paint is named Maori. It's like 5 of them or something. Supposedly, I guess it's meant to look like Maori facial tattoos, except it just really doesn't. Like, one in particular doesn't look anything at all resembling that, except there's some stuff on their face. And it just, I'm not Maori myself, but it feels very appropriative. I didn't get the feeling that they had brought on anyone from that culture to consult on it or anything. And it just made me feel ick, especially when, for example, on their world map, New Zealand is the wrong shape. There's a big hole out of nowhere, but some other maps have it intact. And you can't have soldiers from New Zealand. So that really grated on me when I saw it.
Yeah, it's kind of a profoundly weird situation. And yeah. But none of that is good, like, at all.
Yeah. I mean, they if they brought someone on to tell them how to do it right, perhaps they could have done it right.
Yeah,
or they could have just not half-assed it and done something different instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Not tie it to a culture that it's not actually, If I
Yeah,
would,
exactly.
I worded that quite poorly.
I think I got what you meant. Let's see, another question here. This one is also from Emma Dendry on Twitter. And this question is, do you think that collectibles are inherently capitalist systems that need to be abandoned? Should exploration be rewarded, or should it be a reward in and of itself? And this is a fun one.
I feel a little underqualified, but let's go for it.
The first thing I'm going to mention here is actually going to be the Arkham games.
Okay.
Because their collectible system is probably one of the more, shall we say, robust.
Now remind me what it was. I remember that there were the Riddler statues.
Yeah, there's the Riddler trophies
Is
throughout
that it?
Arkham City.
And there's also the audio tapes and stuff, right?
That is it for in Arkham Asylum they offered the audio tapes, but in Arkham City it's primarily just the Riddler trophies. But what the trophies do is they unlock challenge maps and concept art and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is a cool reward for exploration and a little bit of puzzle solving. But I also do quite firmly believe that exploration can be a reward in and of itself, not necessarily that it should be, because that's not good motivation for everyone.
One thing I have noticed playing back through Final Fantasy X is typically there is an obvious path and a little side path that ends very quickly in a dead end with a chest. There's very little exploration in that game, at least in the first 2/3 or so, where it's very linear, which works well with the story. I don't feel like knocking that because I had already bought into that when I started playing the game. But I hadn't really realized just how repeated this idea of, oh, here's a little side passage with a chest at the end was.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to Hitman, actually, with all this.
Okay.
Where exploration is the reward. Because every single bit of exploration you do leads to different ideas, different like corners of the map that you didn't think that you could use. Just like different bits and pieces of this machine that it has put in front of you that you can use. And that's the reward, that you can use this thing and complete the level in a different way. And that's its exploration.
I feel like Fallout 4 did exploration quite well as well. For me, when I'm exploring something in Fallout 4, the real reward isn't I might find a piece of better kit. It's more, wow, that was really interesting, that place I just found. And there's a lot of that in the world they've created.
Yeah. Yeah, Fallout 4's got like just a ton of really, really fascinating areas, doesn't it?
Yeah, whereas in terms of collectibles, it's got relatively little. I think it's got the bobbleheads and the magazines, each of which give a little bit of reward for collecting them. But
yeah, those are the primary rewards, that they give little bonuses that are permanent.
But I much prefer the enjoyment I get out of finding a cool new area I hadn't found before.
Yeah, like I stumbled onto the Dunwich Borers, for example.
I've not been there, so be careful.
I will not spoil this a little bit for you, but it's a really, really fascinating location with a lot of cool stuff. If you want to seek it out yourself, it's up in the northeastern sections of the map.
Okay.
Do be careful with how far east you go, because you'll start to hit some real high-level content out there.
Considering my current save is in survival mode, I'll have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, I'm talking like level 50.
Oh yeah,
shit
no, I think
there.
I'm level 13.
Yeah, there's some level 50 shit out there.
Okay.
I have seen more than one Deathclaw in that zone. So maybe either like go in there with some really, really beefy power armor, or don't. Like, those are your options. But yeah, like I said, Fallout 4's got a lot of really, really fascinating locations, a lot of fairly interesting lore as well.
So those are some games that do exploration well, or exploration / collectibles. I think we're talking more about exploration, but Do you have any thoughts on games that do that poorly, or have collectibles that were done in a way you didn't like, or anything like that?
I get to bring up the Arkham games again.
Okay.
Um, Arkham Knight, the latest entry in the series, has an ending which is locked behind you finding like 90% of the collectibles in the game. And this is the complete ending of the game.
Is it the canonical ending as well then?
It is the canonical ending.
That's...
And it is the complete ending of the game. Like, you get a shorter version of this scene if you don't collect that much.
That sounds really annoying.
Yeah, because, as you can imagine, a lot of people do not want to have to go find 100% of these fucking green trophies, which hang out everywhere in the city.
It's not fun if you have to start looking them up just because you want to get the better ending.
And it digs into an area of games that I do not like, which is grinding. I hate grinding. I hate it so much that I have not been able to finish games like Bravely Default, which I actually did return because it wasn't good. It required me to grind to advance the story, and that's infuriating to me. I don't want to do that. I want something that is fairly respectful of my time and allows me to make progress, whether I do grinding or not.
I'm going to feel like a hypocrite in agreeing with you about grinding because I know I've spent over 200 hours in the latest Monster Hunter game. But typically, yeah, I agree with you about grinding. It's a grind.
Something else which did exploration rather poorly, I would say, would be Metal Gear Solid 5.
Okay. Why was that done poorly, do you think? Or how was that poor?
It's poor in... It only offers a limited... first of all, it only offers a limited subset of ways to approach kind of anything in general, despite offering these... it offers one open world and one glorified corridor shooter. That's a controversial opinion, which is going to be interesting to see some feedback to that. But, yeah, Metal Gear Solid 5's first map is a glorified corridor without much to explore.
You're talking about the prologue?
Yeah, no, Afghanistan. Not the hospital, which is a linear scene, and I totally understand that.
Okay.
I have some other problems with that scene, but we're not going to talk about that right now. But once it opens up into the Afghanistan map, it's a glorified corridor shooter. The whole thing is just corridors.
Well, I know that there's one section that's blocked off until you've done more of the story, but it didn't feel like that to me. There were certainly roads and there were areas that were blocked off just because you can't get to it because it's too steep. But I didn't feel like there was just one way to go or anything like that.
Well, if you look at the design of the world, it is all just corridors. There's not really any sense of openness. There is the roads and stuff, but that's like it. There's one way to get to, or there's like two ways to get from point A to point B, in most cases.
It's certainly not as open as a game like Skyrim.
No, and it's not really... It's not particularly well designed. And it also doesn't allow for a lot of exploration, nor does it reward any... Even, tactical exploration isn't really rewarded. Not even, Just... I had my train of thought, but, exploring in Metal Gear Solid 5 isn't rewarded whatsoever.
I think any sort of exploration there is all geared towards the idea of, okay, fulfill the objectives, which is generally kill everyone. Whereas in the other games we've discussed, exploration is to find interesting things.
Yeah, even just within the world, finding kind of a little corridor that leads to, I don't know, an oasis or something. There's something there. Even and that can be the reward in and of itself, where you get to see this cool little thing stuffed away in the corner, and that's fine. and again, like for some people that's going to be reward enough, but I think if we want to get back to the issue or the question itself, it's like collectibles are fine and encourage people to seek out new areas of the map. Even in real life. Have you heard of geocaching? Because that's basically collectibles in an open world, but in real life.
That's the XKCD strip, right? Where you get a semi-random, I was going to say IP address, that's not right, latitude and longitude, and then leave a little cache there for someone else to find it.
It's not semi-random necessarily, but the idea is, you go to a specific coordinate and there is a thing there.
Yeah.
And it's video game collectibles in real life. They're cool little things, though. If you're looking for something to occupy your weekend that isn't video games, there you go. I don't know. I think they're fine. I think that they encourage people to explore things in new ways and to seek out these new areas of the map that, like, they may not come back to otherwise. Like, if I were to make an area of a game totally inaccessible until you had a certain piece of gear, and then when you got that piece of gear, you could come back to it and see, like, there'd be like a vista or something like that, just a nice view. But there was no other reward. That wouldn't motivate a lot of people necessarily to do that. But if you throw a collectible up there, now you have given people motivation to go see this beautiful vista.
I can see your point there.
So it can be a way to highlight areas of the map that you are proud of or interested in, but it can also be used to the point where it's like, oh, we're just going to scatter these all over and I hope you find them. Good luck.
I think in terms of that example you gave of coming back to find some sort of beautiful vista or something, I've not played nearly as much of it as I know you think I should have, and I will get back to it at some point, I promise you. But Witcher 3, I think, has done pretty well with that, right? It's got a lot of like contract quests you can pick up that have got a recommended level far higher than when you reach that area. So it's like, come back, do this cool thing, and it'll give you some cool new content, and you have to go off in this area to do it.
I don't know if that falls... Like, there's still a very tangible reward in that, so I don't think that falls under the example that we were just talking about.
Perhaps not, but I feel like the content you experience is kind of in a different category to something you just pick up and then have, if that makes sense. Like
that makes
quest
sense.
content that you play through, rather than finding a weapon at the end of it or something, which seems more like a collectible type thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I know personally, I definitely prefer those incentives, stuff that will add something to the setting or the story rather than my inventory.
Right, how you feeling? You want to do one more question?
Sure.
Do you have anything you want to touch on at all?
If anything occurs to me, I'll bring it up.
Okay. All right. Our last question comes to us from Lindsay Jobson again. Thank you, Lindsay. And Lindsay asks about how game houses are releasing more expansion packs than ever and only releasing 40% of the content out of the gate.
Is it more than ever? Because I think back to games like The Sims, which were, and the later ones still are, forever releasing new content.
Yeah, I don't think it's I definitely don't think it is a new trend. I think that there is definitely an uptick, though. It's not it's not a new idea, but there is an uptick because basically fucking everything has a season pass now. You look at Fallout 4. Fallout 4's got a season pass. Hitman is a season pass.
I'm still not sure how I feel about the whole idea of a season pass. I don't like pre-ordering games, just in general. But a season pass is kind of like that, and I have bought a few season passes.
Yeah, and I talked about this as well. Like, it's paying for an unknown quantity when you purchase a season pass before the season is over. And like, I don't fundamentally like doing that. I have. I probably will again.
Yeah.
But it is not something that I like doing, especially when the unknowns are like Fallout 4's early days, where we knew literally nothing for a period of 9 months about how much DLC was being released or anything, no details. And then in the past month and a half, it's kind of cropped up at long last. Versus something like the Witcher 3's Season Pass, which was upfront from day one, like, hey, we're releasing 2 expansions. It'll be about 40 hours of new stuff. You can purchase this now, or you can like wait until those come out and purchase them individually.
And you're downloading the second one of those tonight, aren't you?
I am indeed. I did not purchase the expansion pass. I did just get those as individual pieces of the game, but I'm very much looking forward to them nonetheless, because The Witcher 3 is a game I very much enjoyed. And in fact, I gave it my personal Game of the Year for 2015. So I'm looking forward to returning to it for Blood and Wine, and also to finish off the main story.
Fair enough. Another game where I've got, I assume it was a season pass because I own all the DLC, but I haven't played it. Mass Effect 3. I really love the Mass Effect series, but I played through 3 right after it came out, and I finished it before any of the DLC came out. So I haven't actually played any of the DLC. If I go back to it, I'm going to want to do 1 and 2 again. I will one day. I promised myself I'll go back and play all that.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
It's interesting to be in a situation where, because I bought, it was, the game and season pass and a pack together kind of thing, because I got that, I now have a bunch of content that I haven't actually played through because I did it too quickly. It's a bit strange.
I've ended up in situations like that with season passes. It's just like, oh, I finished this. Oh, there's like 3 pieces of additional content that came out. It's been months since I last touched this. So I'd have to go back and play the whole story, and that's too much. I'm going to go play something else.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that space with XCOM 2 at the moment, where I finished it before any DLC came out. So far, all that's come out is there's been 1 cosmetic-only pack, and the more recent one, which we just mentioned earlier, has got some new gameplay stuff, but not a huge amount. So I think I'm going to do a second playthrough once the next piece of DLC comes out, because apparently it's got a new class for soldiers and stuff like that, so more significant content stuff.
For Access games are kind of like that. And Paradox expands on their games basically endlessly as well.
Yeah, I remember that with Magica.
Yep, and their grand strategy games are also very expandable. There's a lot that you can do to them, just by nature of the genre. And they take advantage of that. They don't release any season passes or anything, which is interesting. But I don't think... again, we'll get back to the question here now. Like, game houses are totally... There's more DLC than ever before, which is... I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for people who get really, really into a game, or they can only purchase a game, like, due to financial reasons or whatever. And that gives them the opportunity to expand upon their game. And also promotes a kind of higher level of mastery and more commitment to the game, and you're more likely to finish it.
Whereas the downside of having not all the content released at the start is you can get into positions where you've played through a bunch of it, but not all of it, because it wasn't all there when you started playing it. So it's got some... That's a bit of a problem as well. I don't really know if there's a way to resolve that aside from putting everything out at the end, which just makes games take longer. I don't know if that's a good idea at all. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think that's the right approach.
No.
Nor do I think that not releasing any DLC may be the right approach for a given game. I think DLC is ultimately something which is... sorry, I'm not going to say which is, but which can be more valuable than, say, a sequel. Where you get to continue the story instead of having to build something new, necessarily. think that's how I'm going to choose to put that.
Cool. You can't hear it, but I'm nodding.
No, nods are hard to hear. It's little movements of air.
I'll get a bell on a necklace or something then.
Oh, I'm going to turn into a cat. I'm just going to hear you coming up, like... I'm just going to hear you walking behind me.
Oh, I should get Gizmo Collar with a bell again. He used to love that bell. He'd do his, like, trotting run just to hear it. It's gorgeous.
I love cats. Cats are good.
He's gone back down near my heater now.
Alright, I think that's going to do it for us this week.
Cool.
Thank you so much if you have listened to this.
Yeah.
Because this is... Yeah, it's our first thing.
It's exciting.
I'm a little bit nervous about it. I don't know about Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. But we're glad that you listened. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you would like to do any of the following, if you'd like to send us questions, send us letters, send us just anything. Send us things that you'd like us to talk about. Send us hate mail.
Please don't send us hate mail.
Don't send us hate mail. You can email us at pausecastshow@gmail.com, or you can send us a message on Twitter. We are at PauseCastShow. Mark, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Honest Universe. That's my main social media thing.
And I am on Twitter at CockatielQT. Not the letters QT, but Cockatiel Cutie. Alright, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Cool.
Woohoo! We did it!